Welcome, cloud service providers. This video is for you. We believe you're uniquely positioned to succeed in the new year, and Zadara is here to help you get there. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes together talking about your specific business and the new opportunities that Zadara can help you successfully employ, and with excellent profitability. Steve and I will be your hosts and your resources for whatever you need to launch an exciting relationship with Zadara. Now, Steve, it's not uncommon for service providers to be experiencing apprehensions about the future of their business, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all, Joe. Very common. In fact, we did a recent survey of our existing partners, and we found a number of things that's pretty common in their concerns and how they want to move forward with cloud. First one is, how do they grow their revenues without adding a lot of complexity? Very reasonable on their part for themselves or their customers. And how do they retain their customer base versus avoid losing them to the public cloud? That's critical, of course, and big concern for them. How do they also expand the services they offer without really having to retrain their existing staff or really having to broaden the amount of headcount they need to run their business? That's a big concern. Moving to the bottom, they see on-demand as the future, but they have concerns about how do they compete in that on-demand world and how that's going to affect their business. They want to scale their business globally, but they don't want to invest in CapEx, capital expenses, to do it in hardware and software. So they need, or standing up a new colo. So how are they going to do that without that CapEx expenditure, which can be pretty substantial? And then lastly, they want to make sure that their technology partners are right there with them, tethered to their success. They don't want technology partners that dip in, help them one day, and then they're gone and not answering the phone the next. They want a technology partner they can really rely on and work together with. So those are the main ones.
And if those are the apprehensions that are interesting or keeping you awake at night, listening to this broadcast, Mr. MSP, and the issues challenging you to succeed, then Zadara Cloud Services can provide the solutions that will arm you to compete and win against the public cloud. Now, the most effective way to grow your hosting business is to provide each of the industry must-have 3 pillars that make MSPs a bulletproof provider for their customers.
Yeah, exactly. And it all starts with the infrastructure that it's built on, the features of the compute, the networking, and the storage. And we fit that bill, as we'll see in a few minutes. We have a fully robust offering on the compute side with a recent announcement we made with virtual CPUs, and of course, storage and memory for the operating system. And then on the storage side, as we've been in business for many years offering storage as a service, we have a fully robust offering there. And then of course, the networking to tie it all together to make the substantial infrastructure for customers and partners.
Well, that's amazing. And you'll also find that Zadara is offering to be fully elastic, allowing you to pay as you grow by consumption. And it's interesting because you may hear other architectures that talk about pay as you grow, which they're more than happy to do, but then don't allow you to recede or shrink when demands change. Zadara's architecture allows you to fully scale up or down with the hardware upgrades included.
Right, and the real beauty of all this, tying all those things together, is the management of that infrastructure. We will be, all the hardware that comes on site, wherever that site may be for our partners, is all kind of owned and managed and maintained by Zadara. All the upgrades are done. Anytime there's a hardware failure or some sort of a hardware issue, it's all done in a seamless manner, avoiding downtime for our partners, and Zadara takes care of all that. We manage it, we monitor it, and the partners don't have to deal with any of that. That's a lot of the beauty, is you're offloading that kind of stress and burden to us, and that's what we're here for. So you have that expert management 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year.
And we'd like to say that our expertise becomes the MSP's expertise, which just expanded. We're happy to tell you now that the latest weapon in the arsenal is the addition of Zadara Compute as a Service. It now allows the service provider to up their game, which is the ability to run high-performance platforms. For example, VDI for the healthcare industry, or some killer app like video editing for media and entertainment or law enforcement verticals.
Right, and it's a winning combination on top of the compute that Joe just mentioned. We've had storage for a number of years. We actually started as storage as a service provider, so our storage offering is really solid. At this point, we've been doing it for years. We've got it down. That is block, file, and object storage all in one, in a unified manner, and then all the things that Joe was just talking about a minute ago on the compute side. Elastic virtual machines, elastic block storage for the operating system, load balancing and virtual private clouds to tie it all together and provide kind of the isolation that your customer is going to want from each other, or even within their own infrastructure from their different apps or groups as needed.
Well, that sounds great. And if you're an MSP wondering, what am I getting myself into? The answer is today and tomorrow's MSP Federation will be plugging into Zadara's global network of 300 locations across 73 regions and 18 countries, where every VPSA, now that's the Zadara patented technology, can speak to every other global VPSA to connect to a vast number of use cases. We see that the great hyperscale wave took customers out to the cloud, regardless of the use case several years ago. And since then, Steve, some have had substantial issues you're going to talk about. Price, performance, and security are a couple of them. Basically, there are many more costs than they realized, along with high latency and shared drives. So
Right,
a lot of customers are moving back from the cloud, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. You took the words out of my mouth. They sure are. So you mentioned some of the key things from our side. There's no more of the lock-in maybe that they're used to kind of struggling with and feeling. It's a much more consistent performance that we can deliver. Very predictable costs, as you mentioned. There's no kind of egress or ingress fees, which can get very, very costly and can be very unpredictable as well. Our cost is, or excuse me, our pricing, I should say, is very simple and straightforward. Therefore, it's very predictable for a lot of our partners. Therefore, because of we don't charge for ingress and egress, you'll see our customers definitely see and partners see a big savings from what they would experience with the public cloud with our stuff. Now, all that being said, some of those things we talked about a minute ago, like on the compute side, is all AWS compatible, meaning the compute is EC2 compatible. So if a customer is coming from an AWS environment, it's very seamless and easy to move over to our stuff because our stuff is built in the same way. Also offering elastic block storage, which is kind of the same construct that AWS has used. So it's a very seamless transition for those customers.
And some customers have just developed a little mistrust for the cloud.
That's right. Although that being said, they want to have that cloud-like experience, so they still will have that on our stuff. It's just, you know, not with a hypercloud. It's not this kind of cold relationship. A lot of the hyperclouds don't really like to get called. You know, they just send you to self-help web pages with a bunch of text and you just have to read it and figure it out. That's not the case with us. So you get the same kind of cloud-like experience, but not the same, shall we say, relationship experience. Again, I mentioned a minute ago the AWS compatibility. That's also very helpful here. And then from a kind of a business economics model, we are 100% OpEx only, meaning I talked about all the hardware stuff earlier that kind of goes on site, the infrastructure. You know, the partners don't pay for any of that up front. You know, we just agree to an ongoing cost based on like some certain minimums and how much consumption our partners are predicting, but it's all operating expense oriented. There is zero CapEx involved from a business model perspective.
Okay. Well, my dad always used to say, if you want to do a good job, move yourself right next to the work.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I think kind of would come through on that map slide we saw a minute ago is all the different locations we were in. Using the US as one main example, we have sites and presences all over the place. So that, yeah, there you go. So that really helps to be close to a lot of customers because if you go back to the next slide, there may be customer situations where an AWS deployment is not close to them. So that is okay, but there's going to be latency involved. Whereas with our case, since we're all over the US, as that map showed, the latencies are going to be a lot lower. And many customers like to have the data located closer to where their application is if they're choosing to run their application still in a cloud. The other thing I would say here is now that we saw earlier, it's a full suite of cloud services. Now we have compute along with storage as the networking to tie it all together. So that makes it very convenient to run it all on our stuff. And then of course, again, referring to that map, we have presence all over the world, 300 plus clouds deployed at this point with a lot of expansion upside, shall we say, in the near future. We're targeting 1,000 clouds globally within a year or so.
Well, those multiple locations really come into play, Steve, because that final use case is that even in the global world we live in, customers still trust local partners that bring them reliability at a good price.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of mentioned that earlier. They want to have someone that they know and trust and can rely on that's just a phone call away or very accessible. And maybe it's someone they've worked with in the past, just not for the specific application or storage environment or whatever. So that's very appealing to a lot of customers. And again, that EC2 compatibility that I mentioned earlier. So if they're coming from an AWS or they're moving away from a hypercloud, moving to a familiar vendor, which is local, super helpful. And the fact that it's compatible with what they've done in the past makes it very easy and seamless. Like I said already a couple times, we've been in the storage as a service business for many years. So we've got a very strong feature set on that side. And then lastly, of course, the cost savings, which I talked about earlier also. Our pricing is very simple, straightforward, and it can be very predictable compared to probably what they've experienced in a public cloud environment.
Well, a trusted partner really gives the customer a competitive advantage, all of which spring from the business features that our MSPs have been waiting for.
That's right, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, because I've talked on a lot of some of these already, we check the boxes in all these different areas. Like I said, we're a lot more affordable. The cost and pricing model is very simple, straightforward, thus making it very predictable. We don't charge for any of the ingress and egress of the data back and forth within the cloud, so that makes that very straightforward. As we saw earlier, it's 24/7, 365. Managed and operated and maintained by us. There's none of those worries dealing with OBS, driver upgrades, whatever. That's our problem, not our partner's problem. As I said, fully featured enterprise storage, AWS compatibility on the compute side. Again, we are 100% operating expense business model and pay-per-use consumption based. There's zero CapEx invested working with us. I talked about included support, and then as we'll see in a little bit, very tethered to your success. We want you to be successful, and we're actually here to work with you as well. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Well, we love those advantages. They're amazing, and nothing beats the advantage of simple, manageable, and predictable pricing.
That's right. I kind of alluded this already, but just to kind of click down and spend another minute or two on this using, not to harp against AWS too much, but they're kind of an easy example. As I said earlier, like we don't have all these kind of additional charges. Like if you look on the left with AWS, yeah, they have a standard charge based on either your hourly compute consumption, or in this case, storage, gigabyte consumption, but then they charge for infrequent access. They'll charge you for the transactions in and out, the egress fees, retrieval fees, and that can really add up. And depending on the transactions or how much you use that on a month, say, it can really be very spiky, meaning it can be a king's ransom one month and a lot lower the next month. So number one, that king's ransom is a lot of money. Number two, that's a lot of fluctuation month to month, and that's a nightmare to try to forecast and predict. Whereas our side, we don't have all those additional charges. Very straightforward from the beginning, about the ballpark as that base price and cost that customers are used to in this example, like with S3, but we don't charge all the additional egress in and out fees and the retrieval fees. A lot straightforward, a lot more predictable, and of course, again, all fully managed by us.
Oh man, Steve, puts, gets, egress, ingress, and retrieval fees, it's enough to make your head spin. Simple and straightforward, seems like a great model to provide to our partners. So let's look at a couple of real world examples. For backup customers, for example, and those might be folks that are running Veeam to leverage data immutability, Zadara embodies the industry standard backup code of 32110, which ensures zero errors.
That's right, and this is just a quick example of one of the partners we've used. We do a lot with Veeam. We'll continue to do a lot with Veeam. We have a nice kind of complement to what they're doing, and this is a good slide that kind of quickly shows that. I'm not going to go into all the details, but it's a nice way to kind of map to what Joe was just talking about, which is that 32110 model. What's also nice about this slide, or how we work with Veeam, is we can be the primary storage at the top, which is that performance tier that's referring to. Backup copies for that, or we can be the secondary disaster recovery, archive backup repository as well. And again, like I think I mentioned earlier, all the hardware is managed and maintained by us, so MSPs don't have to worry about it. It makes a nice, easy sell-through model with Veeam if they happen to partner with Veeam as well.
A great point that for MSP, Steve, this slide is often the aha moment to realize that the Zadara hardware and software is being shipped to your locations and or on-premise and or a third location where it will act as the fully managed cloud, enacting the zip code 32110, which is 3 copies of data, 2 media, 2 locations, 1 offsite, and 0 errors.
Yeah, exactly. And this slide's a nice complement too. So, the prior slide was more conceptual view in terms of how you're going to back up that data and store all that stuff. This is the more geographic view, again, kind of referring to what I talked about earlier in terms of again, using the US as an example, but the kind of geographic coverage of where our things are, our installations and deployments are, and where customers may be and partners may be located to want to store that data. The other thing too, again, a little conceptually, is it can be on-premise to on-premise for some customers. It can be cloud to cloud, or it can even be on-prem to cloud. I mean, we cover all those angles.
Well, nothing speaks better to success than partner success stories, Steve, and we've got some of the industry's best partners that are already monetizing Zadara Cloud Services. And I think that's important for people to realize, not just utilizing, but monetizing it to great success. And we at Zadara are committed to bringing them 100% through partners. 300 today with the goals of growing to 1,000, like you said, over the next year. Now, every one of our partners grows with us because we are tethered to their success, just like Steve mentioned a little while ago, which means we only win when our partners win, and we've got the history to show it.
That's right. Now I think I mentioned this earlier, I'll expand upon this. So first of all, again, as we are the ones that are kind of like delivering, deploying, installing the hardware into your or into partners' infrastructure, I could say, and we size that up front, meaning we have an idea of the kind of capacities, compute resources that our partners want. So we do this kind of pre-sizing up front so we can determine how much to deploy and install. And we can always grow that, right, if things grow a little more aggressive than we had planned. But we kind of take an initial sizing and then we deliver and install it with our partners. Now, as I mentioned, right, that's all consumption based. There's no CapEx investment from our partners. So it's really Zadara that's footing the bill to do that. So that costs a decent amount of money if you think about it. You kind of understand the costs involved with storage and the compute and the networking and the rack and delivery and installation. So we're making a pretty good investment when we work with a partner. So it's in both of our best interests that you're not going to have 2 customers using that more likely. We want you to grow the amount of customers that are using that infrastructure. So because it'll pay your investment in time and working with Zadara and setting up, and it pays ourselves back too in terms of the hardware and time investment we've put into it too. So like I've said earlier, it's a joint investment, and we are there working with you, not just installing it and deploying it and then walking away. We're going to continue to work with you as you want on the marketing side, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, to help drive that demand, to help build your customer base, because like I said, it's in both of our interests. So then this slide shows an example of a part we worked with over, what is that, a year and a half or so, and you can see how the number of customers has grown. And maybe each of the different colors, it's hard to see, but each of the different colors on this slide is supposed to depict like a customer within that partner on our stuff. So you can see how the number of customers has grown over time, and that's great, and that's what we like to see, and that's kind of our whole strategy in beginning this discussion with a partner, deploying, installing, and then continuing that relationship over time to help grow the business.
Well, that's great, Steve, and we have seen that quite often. This slide is a great depiction of the fact that we start small. We start with a reasonable footprint with one of our partners, and they grow, and therefore we grow together to a prodigious rate in a very short time. And they're able to get there, not all just on their own, but of course with our own help, with enablement. And all the enablement that our cloud providers need is readily accessible from our own partner program. So Zadara will bring to you, the MSP, everything you need to grow into a well-functioning MSP that's able to bill, charge back, show back. We are able to give you help with co-selling and also co-branding and collateral and dedicated channel resources that take the journey with you. So Zadara is committed to the success of our MSP partners. And Steve, that is going to take us close to the recap. So let's take it home to those challenges. It looks like each of those 6 challenges you talked about earlier that are keeping MSPs awake at night can be solved by Zadara.
Yeah, exactly. That was a great lead, and it's a great place to finish, because I think in our discussions today, we've addressed a lot of these things. You know, if you look at how to grow revenues without adding risk. I think the slide we saw a couple slides ago is a good illustration of that.
Can we give that a check, Steve?
I'm sorry?
Can we give number 1 a check?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And then how to retain the customers versus losing the public cloud. I think we can check that box. We talked about that earlier. How to add new services without hiring and retraining. I think we definitely covered that. That's a big check. Competing in an on-demand world, like I said, now that we have compute in addition to storage with the networking to tie it all together and the relationship, I think that's a pretty strong check. Scale globally without that CapEx investment. Again, Zadara is all OpEx in terms of our business model, and I think you've seen the map in terms of, or the globe, I should say, in terms of our coverage there, and you guys are well aware of our growth aspirations. So I think we check that box pretty well. And then lastly, we say alignment with partners on shared objectives, meaning we're right there with you. We want you to succeed with us just as much as we do too. So it's a partnership, and we'll check that box as well.
Well, thanks, Steve. I'm going to double check that last one. Number 6 is near and dear to my heart as the channel chief here at Zadara, that we are certainly aligned with partners in all the shared objectives that we have. And that really brings us to the end of our session. So MSP partners and prospective folks that are out there listening, we'd love you to get in touch with us. We hope you've enjoyed this very brief session, getting to know how to become a highly successful cloud service provider while being powered by Zadara. So if you like what you heard today, please reach out to us on our website, zadara.com, or by email at channel@zadara.com. Until then, from all of us here, this is Steve and Joe, and we will see you next time.